Hey everybody, thanks for joining me on my journey through the Texas Rate Finder application. The goal of this little series is to walk through my process for full stack development. This includes 2 React apps and Python. Today I'm planning on going through the Python code. I don't know if I'll get all the way through everything. This may be a multi-part section. I'm just gonna kind of go until I need a break, and then we'll see. We'll see how far it gets. Again, thanks for joining me on this journey. If you have any questions, things that I don't address that you'd like to know more about, anything like that, please follow up in the comments. I will definitely be monitoring them. So yeah, just let me know if you have any questions. And besides that, if this is something you're interested in, please subscribe. I'll be doing this. I don't know. I'll with some regularity until I get through the application. And yeah, I guess we'll just kind of get right into it. So this is VS Code, which is the IDE that I use for kind of navigating around things like that. So this is, I've pulled this from GitHub, and in order to actually do my development, I typically use nbdev. So we're going to go to this docker compose dev.yaml, and you'll see there's two services here that are getting created. One's a notebook. It's getting mapped from port 8080 to 7575. And then Uvicorn, which is, first of all, passing in some key file and cert file information. So this is actually a secure SSL. It's not super secure in this case because the cert itself is for the Texas Rate Finder application. So since it has the Texas Rate Finder URL associated with it, I don't get the security authorization since I'm using localhost here. And it's pointed at the rate inspector folder, which if we look at that, it includes all of our .py folders. So this is how a FastAPI application is hosted with Uvicorn, and I'm mapping it from port 8000 to 7576. So I've got 7575 is the notebook environment that I have. 7576 is the API. So in order to get to this, I will go through the rest of this just to make sure that you know what all's going on here. So Docker Compose, we're using version 3 of the Docker Compose YAML. We're starting with a Docker file that uses the current build context. So I'll show you what that Docker file looks like. And then that's pretty much everything. I've got a bunch of environment variables. So these are located in the .env file. I'm not going to open that right now because it does have some secrets in it. But this is how you kind of specify which environment variables you want to have, in your Docker Compose. So let's look at the Docker file itself. Let me open that. So what are we doing here? First, we're setting the local time to our America Chicago. We're installing a few things here: Stripe, FastAPI, Uvicorn, PyMongo. I don't think I actually use Stripe anymore, so I think I could delete that. And I'll try to talk through that. If I forget, just let me know, and I can have another video where I talk through Stripe. Hold that for now. And I don't remember why I'm doing this. Pip install PyOpenSSL. I'm not sure. I'll have to dig into what I'm actually doing there. But then I've got all these things that I'm copying. So rate inspector is getting copied over to /app/rate inspector. Setup by getting passed over. Basically all of that stuff is just getting pulled in. I'm moving to my app directory there, and then I run pip install editable period. So install the current application. Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. All right, so now that I've showed you that, let's actually get into my development process. So in order to do this, you type docker compose up -f. Actually, instead of doing that, I'm going to do docker compose and then control R, which is a reverse lookup. Actually, control R first, then type docker compose. And then I'm typing control R to go up to the next thing. And this is the command that I wanted to find. So docker compose dev up, and then I'm going to build. So this is just saying to actually run the Docker file itself. I don't think I actually need to do the build, but I'm going to just to make sure that I've got a fresh instance here. And this usually doesn't take a ton of time, but kind of just want to go through the whole process so that you can see what my real process looks like. And so this is probably look pretty familiar to you if you use Docker, but basically each of those lines just runs independently, and there is some caching that happens with Docker files where it will cache up to a certain point. So if I did a build again, it would go faster the next time. I'm not sure why it didn't go as fast as I would have expected it to there, since it should have already been cached, but I guess, I don't know. All right. Oh yeah, so it does say it's using the cache version, so I guess that just is how long it takes to find the cache, I suppose. And I am going to try to remember when my camera is going to be in the way, which is really challenging for me because I forget that I have my camera going. But it's obviously there and annoying to watch a video with the camera over whatever I'm trying to point out. So I will try to remember. Apologies in advance if I forget. All right, so this is now live at 8080 inside of the Docker container. So if you remember, that has been mapped, the 8080 has been mapped to 7575 on my machine itself. So let me open, and let's just show that this actually works. If I do 75. All right, so we are now running inside of our Jupyter Notebook environment. So the other thing that I have is 76, and then we're gonna just do docs. Oh, and this is important because I'm serving it on HTTPS. I need to actually specify that here. And it's not private, which is understandable. So we're gonna do continue because it's unsafe, which is fine. It's basically just saying this isn't secure. You probably don't want to go here. Since I'm the person developing this, I'm not worried about it being malicious, but that is something to consider, especially if you're going to a website that doesn't have proper HTTPS setup, is that you probably shouldn't go there. That's a good warning most of the time. All right. So now let's go through. Let's just open up the first notebook here, which is the usage file, I guess. So this is going to show you, we're specifying the American Chicago time zone. These are the different libraries that we're using here. Yeah, I guess let's just kind of get into this. I specify the SSL cert and the SSL key here. This is important because for my connection to Smart Meter Texas, which I haven't talked much about, in order to connect to it, I have to have a valid SSL cert. And so this is how I'm doing that connection, is I pass that information in, and then later on I'll show you where that's actually getting put into our request to Smart Meter Texas. Okay, so this is just a get data. So if you look, there's nothing really special going on here. I'm using a data frame, start date, end date. So it's just so that I don't have to type this every time when I do a get data. And this is just kind of showing that with a example CSV file that I've created. And then I do have a couple of certs here, just saying, let's make sure that there's nothing below the min date in the usage sample DF, and nothing above the end date, I guess. Okay, so a lot of this is just to interact with the Smart Meter Texas website or their API. So their API comes with information that looks like this. The A's mean something special. There's also a -E option. So this means that for this period of time, which is, I think, a 15-minute period of time, the user had 0.068 kilowatt hours of usage, and the -A means that this is actual time. So I'm showing how this is used. This is actually what daylight savings time looks like. So there's actually an extra set of data there. So there's an extra. Basically, it always has the same number of slots. Sometimes it will add the dashes when it isn't using them, and sometimes it'll have all of them filled out when it is using them, if that made sense. I might have said that wrong. But yeah, just a couple tests here to test out what it looks like during daylight savings time, since daylight savings time is always one of those edge cases you have to deal with. Here, yeah, this is showing whether we have the estimated or actual, whether it's a -E flag or not, we get the same result. So that doesn't matter a whole lot. And then I'm testing here that we actually get a warning message, which is just a print thing that's shown up here. So just kind of confirming that things are working how we would expect them to be. Yeah, I think that's everything. I don't really remember what I guess it says I'm testing fall DST. I don't really know why I've got a sample for normal. Like, why would DST be the same here is what I'm curious about. It apparently is, and this is one of those, there's probably a good reason for the test. I don't remember why I wrote that test, but I would assume if it breaks that I will understand why why I had it and why I need it. All right, well, I don't think I need to go through all of my tests. So here I'm taking the full meter read data and parsing it out into a list of data. And then here's kind of the first interesting thing that I'm actually doing here. So this is going to be getting data, historical usage from the Smart Meter Texas website. So you can see we're creating a session. We're running that get certs command from above, the function that grabs our cert paths. And then we're getting the authentication where we're using the two system environment variables that we have created here. And then if somebody doesn't specify the end date that they want, we assume that they want today's end date. And then we assert start date is less than our end date. Curious about that because I don't ever enter a start date here, so that seems kind of interesting. I'm assuming that gets filled in somewhere earlier, and by earlier it's actually going to be below where we are. This is actually some code I'm not super happy with right now, and part of what I'm thinking is during these sessions I might start to do some refactoring, talking through this and kind of walking through it. So I don't know what I would change here yet, so I'm just going to keep talking through it. But this is something that I just feel like everything that I'm working through is kind of, I don't know, it doesn't feel awesome right now. So here's the API that I'm hitting for Smart Meter Texas. So it's got a API call to this 15-minute interval reads, and I'm passing my data in. So it's, okay, what's the start date? What's the end date? How do you want your data? And what's the ESI ID that you're wanting? So passing that information in, and then parsing out the response. So if I don't have that ESI ID, if it's not an active ESI ID in my active agreements list, I raise a 403 exception. Just means that I think that's a not authorized, or forbidden, I guess. There's actually two that I think I could have used probably for that. 403 forbidden I think is better than unauthorized, but I could really justify probably either of those. And then if it's not a 403, I look at the error code that I'm getting back. And probably raise a 500 exception. Yeah, unless... Yeah, I don't know. There's a couple different exceptions here, I guess. And then I'm parsing out the energy data. If I do have data back from Smart Meter Texas, I'm parsing that out and going through each day's data, appending that day's data, the consumption, to the full usage data frame, and generation goes into the full generation data frame. At the end of that, I fill both of those out. I concatenate a full usage DF. So at this point, it's a list of full usages. So I'm kind of doing it for both of these, actually. It's a list of data frames, and I use PD concat to combine all of those into a single data frame for usage and a single data frame for generation. And then I return both of those data frames. Here's some different tests that I'm doing. And just kind of confirming that things are working how I expect them to be. These aren't technically tests, but they do test things functionally. And then this one's a more legitimate test where I'm expecting a specific assertion error. And just saying, how many things am I expecting back from this? So beyond that, then I have this get historical usage. So the first thing was the get usage from Smart Meter Texas. Now we've got to get historical usage. This requires an ESI ID, start date, end date. So if you notice now, we are going to have an end date minus date time. Which to me, it's interesting that this one doesn't have a start date and that we have an end date of none by default, because I guess that would mean I'm trying to think of the implication of that, and I really can't too much right now. I feel like I'm maybe thinking too hard about it, but it doesn't seem good. Seems like there's potential bugs there because of the none end date, and which would default to today, and not specifying the start date. Like, somebody has to put in a start date, but they don't have to put in an end date. So I don't know. Maybe it's not actually a big deal. Maybe I'll think through that a little bit more, but all right, so let's look at this get historical usage function now. One thing I'm noticing that I really wish that I were doing a better job of, like, I've got get historical usage. I've got a little bit of documentation here about, like, okay, well, what is that? But what about, I don't ever specify what get usage from SMT is. Am I just saying, like, both of these go under the get historical usage piece? Because I'm sure get historical usage probably calls that other function. Does it have to? Is there a connection between those two functions? I'm thinking there is, because I guess I can't think of, okay, when would I use get usage from Smart Meter Texas and it wouldn't be from get historical usage. Why do I have those broken out as two separate APIs? Or two, not APIs, but two different functions. I guess that's something that I want to think about at least. So I guess I'm doing my caching here. Maybe that's why I think if I remember correctly, this started out as a single function and it was turned into two functions when I wanted to be able to do some caching. So I guess that's probably why. That is why. Okay, I think I can finally explain what the difference between get historical usage is and get usage from Smart Meter Texas. So if you'll notice here, we're doing all these if statements. So we're saying, okay, file name is just going to be esiid.csv. If end date is none, put it as today. Start date is none, put it as today minus, or end date. So if you did specify an end date, it would be that date minus time delta, like 56 weeks. So 13 months basically back in the past. And then we're going to say, okay, consumption path, it exists somewhere. It doesn't really matter what it is. But if our consumption path has file name in it, which is what we just defined up here, if that exists, we're just going to read from that CSV. We're going to get the consumption and the generation data frames. Once we've done that, we're going to capture the max date and the min date from that. If the max date is less than end date minus 2, then basically that means we need to update to the most recent version from Smart Meter Texas. Otherwise we just use consumption df and generation df. But if we don't have anything, we go straight to get usage from Smart Meter Texas. This is like a fresh pull from Smart Meter Texas, and we're saying grab everything for this ESIID from this start date to this end date. And then we're saving that information back to our consumption path file name and generation path file name. So this is a caching technique that I don't really think I like anymore. I like it kind of, but I think that there's some upgrading or some improvement to do here. For instance, we're doing end date minus 2, and I remember the reason for this is because Smart Meter Texas doesn't always have data for the previous day. So if that happens, we don't get the benefits of caching, which of course can be problematic because it just slows everything down. I need to think more about how I would like to do that, but that's why I have the minus 2. And so that also means if somebody comes to your site 2 days in a row, they're going to get yesterday's data, which for our case doesn't matter a whole lot because it's close enough. It's if somebody's looking at a new rate plan, one extra day isn't going to change the forecast of which plan they should use. So I'm not too concerned about the 2 days thing from that perspective. So maybe that's fine, I guess. I was kind of talked myself out of that being a problem. Okay, so what else do we have here then? We're merging consumption with generation. Okay. And then we're creating a single column here. See, a lot of this just feels like it needs cleaned up. I really don't like how much stuff is happening on these. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if I get into it, it won't be that bad. I don't know. I feel like I'm complaining a lot, and I really am happy with how this code is currently, but I do think that there's room for improvement, which is another reason why I think it's a really good one to walk through and kind of talk with other people, that at least to show people what it currently looks like. And I think it'll be a learning opportunity for everybody to go through this process, and I'll kind of show the warts of the problem of the project, and hopefully do some refactoring, get it to a point where I'm more happy with it, and that, you know, show the process as I do it, kind of build it in public, refactor in public. This is just another basically I'm just showing the idea here. I was testing out what this stuff all looked like. Yeah, I don't know. It's a bunch of... Oh, here's a good one. This one's the rep info. So this comes from the Public Utility Commission of Texas. They've got a rep.csv. I needed this to get the rep ID, which is important for creating a new agreement, actually. So here's the create new agreement function. So this is what the Python function looks like that I created. Which you can see it's got data. I'm posting it to the new agreement, and that will generate an email to it'll generate an email to this email person. Like, so if this is, you know, my email, Kevin at the Problem Solvers Guild, they would pass in their ESI ID, their meter number, and their rep ID. And it would generate a email to kind of confirm that you actually do want to allow me to have access to your usage. So this is what we're using for that sign-up process, which I'll show the actual backend portion of that, because this isn't the backend yet. This is just a function. The backend API piece is still to come. It's further into the code, which actually I'm going to show that next, because I think that it's useful to go from like, okay, create new agreement. I'm not even going to finish this code. I'm going to go straight from here. So this function, create new agreement, takes in an email, an ESI ID, meter number, rep ID, optional agreement duration length, and optional language. We're going to look in our 06 backend notebook. So this is where all of our actual backend functions look. And first I'm going to show it here. Post user info. So if we look at what that does, we're taking in an email, an ESI ID, a meter number, and a current rep ID. Let's go find it here. So we're posting to users. So let's look at this function now. We're taking in a user, which is either a user or a dictionary. force equals false. I'm not sure what that is yet, but let's take a look below. So if is instance user, so if it is a dictionary, which we've said is an option, we're going to take that dictionary and convert it into a user. We're creating the connections to our Mongo database. And then we're going to take that connection to our user collection in MongoDB and find something that matches this user's email. So if you look down here, I would be taking Kevin at problemsolverskill.com, find that email. So then if our force flag is false, which it is by default, and we returned a user, then all we do is say, hey, we've already got a user with that, return the user. Otherwise, if somebody said, I know I've got a user already, but I want to overwrite that with a new user, then we would update that user with the ESI ID, meter number, and rep ID in our user dictionary here. And so the other thing I'm doing here is I'm saying if our user dictionary is none, I insert this information into our Mongo database before I actually do a create new agreement. The reason that I do this is to ensure that even if there's an issue in the create new agreement, that I'm actually able to get that information out, so that it gets saved. Otherwise, I would see that there's an error in create new agreement, but I wouldn't know what user that was associated with. So this create new agreement here, we've got rate inspector, usage, create new agreement. We're passing user email, user ESI ID, meter number, and current rep ID. So that is getting posted into, so that's getting passed through to this create new agreement. One thing that's interesting that I didn't even know about until I'm just looking at it now, I've actually got agreement duration and language available to modify if I would like to, but I'm not passing them in as options here. So one thing that I could do here, and maybe I'll just do it just to show you that it is an option, is let's pass that in. Let's do our agreement duration equals 9 by default, and language equals English by default, which I'm pretty sure it was all caps, just double checking. Yep. And if I'm doing that there, one thing that I've learned more recently is that I shouldn't default in multiple places, so I'm going to remove this default, which may cause some issues, but I'm going to do it anyways. All right, so I've removed the agreement duration from here and the language from here, and I've passed them instead into here. And so one cool thing about FastAPI is this, it's not going to work, is that if I pass them in like this, it'll actually allow me to use those as parameters. So I'd actually be able to update those in other ways as well. So I'm thinking I'm gonna just run a couple pieces here. So okay, I don't think I need to run everything, but I wanted to kind of start through some of this and post user info. That's probably where I want to be, right? So basically just making sure meter number, so rep ID, and then agreement duration and language. Okay, so we've got our agreement duration and our language there. And so one, I guess, interesting thing that I'm doing here is I'm creating a test function here because I don't want to actually send this new agreement information. One thing I'm noticing though is that I don't actually pass the arguments that I'm sending. So like the things that I would be passing to create new agreement, I think that would be good to show here. So at least maybe as a debug. So I'd expect this to be like a tuple and then a dictionary. And I don't think that I currently am using debug, so I need to change my logger level if I want these to show up. Wondering if that's the wrong place to do that. Don't remember for sure where I'm supposed to do. I mean, it seems like that would make sense, but let me just restart my Jupyter notebook here and interesting. So those don't seem to be getting oh, I see. It's because it says it's skipping because it's already there. Oh, quargs. KW args, not K args. I don't know if you noticed that, but yeah, this is only going to show info because we're never getting down. The create new agreement function is never getting triggered on that line. So yes, that makes more sense. So we're seeing arguments are these things. There's no keyword arguments. And then it's throwing a new agreement created exception. It's kind of just to confirm that it's actually working. And then I put it back the way I found it right there. So that looks good, I think. And all right, so that is, yeah, I guess that kind of shows one function. And now let me actually export the changes that I made there. And now we can show you something cool. So if I refresh this page, you can see now our post user info has an agreement duration, language, and whether to force it. So the reason this is cool is because I could actually post this I could post this and it would send this information would get passed to our create new agreement. It would get passed in here and actually change the agreement duration based on what I selected. So I think that's pretty cool. That's a possibility with just, I mean, really the only thing we did is we added it as a input. Wherever that was. Yeah, we added them as inputs here. So I think that's gonna be, I think I probably have went about as long as I should for right now. Maybe this is, I don't know, maybe this is too boring. I'm gonna probably see what you guys think of it. Yeah, I will. I'll give you, I'll see what you think. I feel like it's kind of boring to go through. But I want to, yeah, I want to give you a chance to watch it, even though it's kind of slow moving. So far we just kind of went through the usage stuff. So functions that are getting exported. I didn't really talk about export, but that's an NBDev version 1 keyword, which means that this function is going to get pulled into Python, into the .py file that's specified up here, so into the usage.py file. So all of this stuff actually is. All right, so I guess that's probably a good spot to leave it off for today. Tomorrow, or sometime, I guess I shouldn't say tomorrow, but the next lesson I will talk through a couple different ideas. The Python classes that I created for this, which are for usage, and then I'll start going into the rate plan pieces as well. So thanks for watching, especially if you got this far into the video. I feel like I kind of drug it on longer than I maybe should have, but hopefully you learned something about how Python interacts with FastAPI, interacts with, kind of all of that interacts together. One thing that I kind of had forgotten to even mention here, which I probably should since that's kind of the point of these videos. This right here is a FastAPI post endpoint. So I'm creating an endpoint at /users that if a HTTP post request is sent, this is what will be ran. So you might have kind of inferred that from what I was talking through, but I never explicitly said it. So I'm using NBDev here, which is what this export piece is doing again. But the @app.post is FastAPI, and then this is just normal Python. I've got my Mongo database happening here too, but overall kind of that's what's going on there. Let's actually show a couple more things in this video before I actually close it. Here are all my FastAPI imports that I'm doing. So I'm importing HTTP exceptions, so you can customize what type of exception occurs when specific Python errors happen. So you can use that, and I'm creating the FastAPI app here. So it's called app. And if you look at kind of everything else that gets generated from this, you'll see it uses that app.get is being used to generate the HTTP GET request for test date time. And if we go over here, you can see that GET request as well. So that's how all of that kind of is getting pulled together. Hopefully some of that made sense. If not, definitely let me know, or let me know what you'd like me to explain better. Thanks for listening and for kind of working through this with me. I appreciate being able to talk through it, and I hope you find some value in these. So thanks. See you next time.